On this episode of INI9, I have with me Professor Manu Bhagavan, the Associate Professor of History at the City University of New York. And he wrote this brilliant book called The Peacemakers about Nehruvian foreign policy and foreign policy just when India became independent and unto the last days of Nehru. And it so happens that both of us are in Bangalore, and we discovered that we are Bangaloreans in some sense, and we took this opportunity to have this little conversation on his book, The Peacemakers. So, Manu, can you just sort of give us this 1-minute summary of this very beautiful book that is written?
Well, thank you for that very flattering description and introduction. The Peacemakers essentially is a secret history of Indian foreign relations in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's a story about human rights and internationalism, and it's told as a political thriller, and I think that captures the essence of what the book is. It has a very large cast of characters from some very well-known figures from the Indian nationalist movement: Gandhi, Nehru, Vijay Pandit, I guess less well-known, and Hansa Mehta, as well as a broad range of international characters: Albert Einstein, W.E.B. Du Bois, the Roosevelts, Wendell Willkie, Nikita Khrushchev, and more.
Yeah, so what I got from that book, and I was just telling you, I read it on a plane, and just was this brilliant narrative. I went through the book very quickly. It was very gripping, very readable. But every other page I was cringing. Right? We're looking at Jawaharlal Nehru, this man who's been elected Prime Minister of this new republic, newly independent nation, and instead of looking after its national interests and fighting for its national interests in the international forum, he was on this idealistic trip where he was trying to create one world, a brotherhood of man, and probably create a world federation on the lines of what India was. And how does that relate to statesmanship, across history, especially the last century?
Well, first let me say that there is in the historical record some people who question Nehru on the question of the national interest. Now, most of these voices are muted until the Sino-Indian War, and that's when they begin to be more vocal. But in the records I read in writing this book, their criticisms are clear at that point. And Vijay Pandit is the one who is most sharp in her response. Now, Nehru has flagged this in different places before as well, so it's fair to say that this is their answer to your question. To talk about the national interest from their point of view, there was a short-term reading, and there was also a long-term reading. And so what might seem like being in the national interest in the short term might ultimately not be. And they felt that it would ultimately be in every Indian's interest, in as much as everything they were doing was in the interest of larger humanity, to pursue this goal. Peace worldwide, particularly in the context of a world threatened by catastrophic nuclear war, was something that was fundamental to, it was an existential threat to every Indian. So solving that problem was the priority. And only if that larger threat was taken away, could there be any sense of real security for Indians or for anyone else. So they linked these things together, and they urged people who criticized them to think about things in this way. And Nehru did that in a few instances, but after the Sino-Indian War, it was Vijay Pandit who was very clear about that.
Right. But now, Nehru was clearly a very well-read man, right? I mean, for a politician, he was reasonably, I would say, extraordinarily well-read. So, what were the influences on his thinking that got him to that stage? Because if you look at Indian history, Kautilya and others are hardcore realists, right? And then you also have statecraft over the last 200 years, where there were divans of various kings who were also pretty well-established realists. And there was C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, who was Nehru's contemporary, K. Panikkar, who was Nehru's contemporary. These guys were schooled in the realist tradition of statecraft. And how did Nehru sort of just jump over this? Maybe Gandhi was an influence, but were there any intellectual influences which got him to this stage?
It's a great question. The broad answer is that, first of all, let's put Nehru in context, which is that going back and reading the writings of any number of prominent figures from India in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, whether it's Tagore, whether it's Aurobindo, whether it's Ambedkar, whether it's Gandhi, whether it's Jinnah, whether it's Nehru, there is a broad engagement with internationalism. Mm-hmm. And this is a multi-decade notion. It's not something that just emerges in the 40s. Mm-hmm. There is some of this dates back to 1919 and Woodrow Wilson's League of Nations proposal and thinking more broadly from there. But some of this is
before that.
Some of this, they're very broad trends here. So what is the source of Nehru's thinking on this matter? That's a little hard to say. I think it's a terrific question, and it's one that I think some of us are beginning to look into, some historians, but we don't have the answer yet in terms of the precise. Or Sunil Kilmani is working on sort of the masterpiece Nehru biography. Maybe it will be in that, but otherwise, we'll need to continue to pursue the question. Now, in terms of, I just want to take 1 minute to talk about this realist question. So first, yes, I think that Nehru was influenced by Gandhi, first of all, who was an enormously creative thinker. And what he did is he brought real-world solutions to real-world problems. But they were fantastic solutions. They were solutions that nobody else thought of. No one else thought was possible. But he brought them to bear and did so successfully, by and large, with obviously caveats to that. And Nehru was he believed in this method at one level. He was impressed with its success, and I think that he tried to bring that to bear ultimately in, broadly speaking, everything that he did, but particularly in terms of foreign policy. There is some recent academic work that's just come out, which talks about Gandhi as a realist, by a Yale political scientist named Karuna Mantena. And this is her large project looking at Gandhi and realism. So I think that there's a debate to be had as to whether or not Gandhi was a realist or the idealist, or however we want to describe the opposition to the notion of realism. And similarly, those sets of questions of categories or questions of titles can be applied to Nehru as well. Was he a realist? Was he an idealist?
Thanks. That was a great conversation. And
thank you.
Thank you for having this conversation.
Thank you. My pleasure.